Hey YouTube, Kevin here. I got a question that was asked to me. They have a 125 and they have a couple 100s, and the question was, how can I get more top end out of my KE100 or my KM100 or my KD80 or any of these small 80cc to 100cc bikes? And they're all talking about, you know, gear ratios and all that type of stuff, because they don't make a CDI for this. You know, you can only get it on the factory, like I did. I pulled one off of a 1999 factory bike that got wrecked. In fact, I'm going to end up doing one on this KM100. I'm going to show you how that works as well, but that's on another video. We're going to talk about gear ratios for a few minutes. It's a real simple concept. You see people with dirt bikes of like 125 and higher, and they've got this huge rear sprocket. And then our bikes have these small sprockets. And they're like, okay, I can't do a wheelie or anything like that. Okay, I'm going to tell you why that is. Because these bikes don't have the torque to bring that front wheel up. I mean, they're close. I mean, I could do a small wheelie with this KM100 because of its tire size. This has a larger tire and a longer swing arm, which brings it harder to get this front wheel up off the ground. And I also want to add, you shouldn't be doing with that with the bike, because when the bike comes slamming down on these small bikes, the fork seals take the beating. And it's just abuse that the bikes don't need. They're not designed for that. Like a 125 is a sport bike. It's for jumping, it's for doing all that type of stuff. These bikes, however, are not. These are trail riding bikes on off-road. These bikes are great if you want to go back and forth to work and you live locally, and then you see that dirt road that strikes your suspicion and you want to go check it out. That's the bike to do it on right there. Any one of these. These are not high performance bikes by any stretch of the means. They're 11 horsepower and they've probably got about 12 foot-pounds of torque, if that. And not enough to bring a 150-pound person up in the air with them. So this bike right here, since I've done the electronic ignition in my previous video, I've gotten more power out of it. I've gotten you know, my power band, not more horsepower but more power. The power band lasts longer. A smoother idle, a lower idle. I've gotten a lot of benefits already with that electronic ignition, and I absolutely love it. And one's going in this KM100. And so let's talk about gear ratios. They make a couple of different ratios for these bikes, and show you what those look like. Your final drive right here. This is a 40-tooth rear sprocket, commonly found on the KM, the KE, the KD 100s. It's 40 teeth, and that's where they get that number from, 40. All right, and then I got a newer sprocket set right here to put in that bike. But this is a 15 tooth, and they make a few different ones. They make a 14 and a 13, which is smaller, less teeth, and they make a 37 tooth. This sprocket is actually good. I saved this one. This is a 37. We'll mount that up. Actually, we'll probably put it on the black one. You can see it better. You can see how the diameter of it is a little smaller. Okay. This sprocket right here is going to go on my KE100, and I'll tell you why I'm choosing that one. Alright, so if you ordered sprockets factory, the factory replacement one is a 15 front and a 40 back. You can get these 37, 41, and there's a few other ones. I mean, you can get them in any teeth, but you know, those oddball ones are really hard to find. But if you're going to get a factory set, it's a 40 and a 15. And then, what do you call it there? And a 37 is for another bike. This one came off of the Kawasaki KH100 or KC100. A little bit of a smaller sprocket. It'll bolt up to any one of the Kawasaki models, and it'll fit on your bike. Now, I'm going to tell you what they will do. This sprocket right here is bigger. it's going to give you a faster takeoff, but you're going to lose it in the top end. The smaller sprocket is going to give you a slower takeoff, but you're going to be faster in the top end. So top end, bottom end, what does that mean? Okay, top end means you use high speeds, 50, 60, 70 miles. This one right here is going to be right in the upper 40s, 50s, and 60s, early 60s. So I think the top speed with this gear is 62 miles an hour. With that one, I think it's going to be like somewhere around 65. Once again, this bike should not be on the highway, but that right there is what you can get out of it for a speed. And I want to touch base with you on how to tell if your sprocket is worn or not. This right here is a worn sprocket, and I'm going to show you how you can tell. If you look carefully at these teeth right here, okay, you can see how these the tips are bent. They're not straight on. See if I can get a good picture of that. Take a minute, suck it in. There you go. Okay, now I'm going to compare them to a factory tooth. See how they're chiseled? That's one. Also, too, on the very tip of the teeth, you'll see there's a margin. Okay, when that margin goes away, that's another way you can tell, but you should never let it get that far. These ones have a little bit of a margin. I got to rotate my camera here. They have a little bit of a margin, but it's running thin, and that's when they get thin, that's when they bend. And then when you get on the torque on it, it basically, like right there's a good view of a one. I don't know if you can see that or not. Hopefully you can. These are all bent back, the whole set of them. And I'm going to take this sprocket right here and put this up to it. See how nice and straight and powerful these are? I mean, they're brilliant, you know, compared. You can see how these are worn on the edges. They're rounded. This sprocket is absolutely hammered. The sprocket is worn thinner in some spots here. The teeth are rounded. They're not crisp. They should be crisp. Chisel cut. Just like this, see? I don't know if you can see the comparison. How rounded they are. These are different ways you can tell if your gears are worn. These are all sharp cut. And I still see all the margins on them. So this is a good sprocket. The one in my hand. The one on this rim is absolutely hammered. And I can tell you right now, this tire came off of a KD100, and it was actually had a lot of fun. I'll tell you that right now. You can always tell the bike had a lot of fun just by the wear of the chain. So anyway, that's part of it. And also too, I want to, since I'm doing drivetrain right now, I want to touch base on chains. Okay, your chain stretches. It's metal, but it stretches. Sometimes they break, sometimes they don't. And in the back of your bike, you can see where this is where you tighten your chain on both sides. You'd loosen up your axle, and then you'd want some deflection. Now you can see how much movement I have in my chain links. This chain is hammered. See how much I'm moving the tire, the sprocket, without moving the rim? Those are my dampeners doing that. And they are also worn. So those are going to have to be replaced. What those are is there's 4 rubber pieces in here, and they're on a they go back and forth. I'll show you. I don't have any of those to show you, but I'll show you on the back side of the driver where they go. On the back, this is from a KE100, and you see these 4 pins right here. The rubbers go right in between them, and it dampens the shock. And what happens is over time they get rock hard, and they lose their ability to spring back, to stay solid. And these on that rim is absolutely worn out, absolutely just junk. So I gotta buy some new insulators for it. I'm gonna buy those, and I'm gonna replace the sprocket to a 37 tooth, And I'm also going to replace my chain. I have lubricated the chain, but it's got so much play in it that's actually wearing my sprocket. So you can see how much I can pull this back. It's just had it. It's seen better days. What will eventually happen is the rubbers will wear out completely. It'll disintegrate them and it'll just rip them right out. So we don't want to let that part happen. So we have that going on this bike. We're going to show you about the how to change out the sprocket. And I'm actually going to use the used sprocket on here. And I'm going to tighten up that chain. I have a little bit of life left in it. I might change, when I change that sprocket, it might help. Yeah, because it's still a good margin. I'm just going to change that chain. I'm going to put a new chain on it and go from there, because the chain is just absolutely hammered. And that's how it wears out the sprocket, by the way. If your chain is too loose, you're basically hammering on the, it's literally like impact. It's hammering on the teeth of the sprockets. So you want to make sure your chain is lubricated and cleaned. That chain's original for the bike, so ain't that sprocket. Although it has 1,700 miles, part of it was the bike sat in a dry area, and the chain, when I got the bike, was extremely dried out. So I lubricated that chain right there. Maybe, I've had this bike for 2 years, and I must have lubricated that chain like 30 times. And I'm not even kidding you. I mean, just for it to absorb oil. It had that dry, crusty look to it, you know. The way this is, my oil is too high, and this one, see how nice that is? There's like movement, but it fills, the chain links fill in the teeth. See how that is? It fills them in. Where mine, I'll show you again. This is actually a good. I'm gonna rotate the camera here for a second. Okay, see how it's like that? You can see how the two teeth fit in between the chain link. Well, the chain link fits in between the teeth, I mean. Okay, now see how that is on that one? And see the big gap on mine. Yeah, that's the big problem right there. So the sprocket's worn and the chain is worn on the KE100. So we're gonna get that switched out and changed around a bit. This chain right here's got more oil on it than it needs. So that's how you can tell if you are gonna need to replace your sprocket. Is simply by checking it, you know, looking at it, see how much play it has, how much what do you call it there, movement it has. That's all very, very, very important. So we got a one sprocket. We have a brand new sprocket right there. Brand new sprocket. We have a brand new driver sprocket, which goes on the motor, and a used sprocket that's in good shape. So that 37 is going to end up on my bike. I'm going to replace the chain, clean up the sprocket a little bit more, and that's all that's going to be. So remember, if you're trying to figure out what you're going to do for gears, okay, the smaller the gear, the more high speed you got. The bigger the gear, the more torque you got, the more it's going to take off faster. You see these bikes that have like 60, 70 teeth, like on a 125, that's what they're trying to, you know, push on the, you want a big gear on the back of your, your 125 or your 250s, because those bikes right there can do wheelies, they can climb, and that's the gear to help them and move at a high speed. These bikes don't have that capability, so they resort to small gears. It's basically like a pedal bike. Let's take a look at my pedal bike here. I'll show you. Real simple. We're going to compare right now. Okay, so when you're looking at a pedal bike and you're on the big gear right here, you could pedal that sprocket, which pretend that's your crankshaft, because it basically is a crankshaft. You can pedal as fast as you want to go, but it doesn't feel like you're going anywhere because you got this big gear. But you can climb a hill no problem. So if you're riding a pedal bike and you want to climb a hill, that's the gear you want. Okay, same thing with that 40 tooth. If you want to go and you want to climb and you want, what do you call it there? You're not going back and forth to work, but you're going to be going over up and down a lot of hills, you know, steep hills and stuff like that. That would be the gear to have. But then you look down here and you got the small gear. Now it's harder to crank, but you're faster. You're going way faster. Okay, and that's because you got the smaller tooth back here. So, same thing. The bigger the smaller the gear back here in the rear end, the faster you're gonna go. The taller the gear, the slower you're gonna go. But you'll be able to climb. This will give you speed, less torque. Now we're gonna go talk about the front. What do you call it there? The front gears. Okay, so talking about the front gears is just the opposite. If you're looking at the front, when you have it on the small gear in the front here, and you have it on the big gear in the back, you got, what do you call it there? You get to climb faster. You put it on the top gear, it's a little harder. So right there, with this gear ratio right here, with this on the small one in the front and the big one in the back, I can do a wheelie. If I move it up here, I pedal less and move a little faster, change the ratio. So you want to keep that in mind when you're doing this. That right there is the easiest gear. That bottom one, small in the front, big one in the back, easiest gear. As you move up, it's a little harder to pedal and it will give you a better top end. So on the dirt bike end, on the engine, by putting the 15 tooth, it's like having the bigger gear. So you're going to have your top end gear in the back. Up here, it's going to make you move faster because you have a bigger gear right here going against the smaller gear in the back. It's going to make it go a lot faster. But you're going to lose your takeoff. Like right now, if I got on this bike and started pedaling and someone was sitting next to me, the same height, size, weight, and strength, and had theirs on this big gear, I'm going to be able to take off faster with the little one than they would be with that one. So really what it comes down to is, do you want to go faster or do you want to go slower? But the slower you go, the more you can climb and go over things and everything else. But if you're going back and forth to work like I am, and you just want to cruise on a Enduro, I'm going to go with the smaller gear in the back and the bigger gear in the front. So I'm going to go with the 15 in the front and the 37 in the back. That's the gear I selected for my KE100 because I want the bike to go faster. I want to be able to keep up with traffic, and because I'm in traffic most of the time, I don't even take this bike off-road. But if I did, then I'd want the gear ratio that's on it because I really wouldn't care about speed. So hopefully that helps you. I know it's confusing. It feels like it goes back and forth. And then my buddy's got a 125 and he just bought a 72 tooth gear, and you're like, oh my god, what is that gonna do? Well, that's a big gear. That's huge. That's like 1.5 of these things. Okay, it's like 1.5 of these. It's huge. It's literally, it's like that big around. I mean, it's huge. But he's got the tire diameter for it. He's got the horsepower and torque. We don't have that in these little 80s and 100s. So we have to make up for other places. And we do that simply by the final drive gears. So this is what I'm going to choose right here for mine. The 15 in the front, the 37 in the back. And that's going to give me at least 3 to 4 miles an hour faster. It's not going to affect my speedometer because that's driven by the front wheel. But if I'm going to climb, that's what I want. So hopefully this helps you with gear ratios on smaller bikes, not so much the bigger bikes. Bigger bikes are a totally different animal, and those are set up totally different because of their gearing in the motor, their high power, and their torque. So, but anyway, if you're dealing with a KE100 KM, all those little bikes, the KX, Yamahas, the KD80s, the 100 Hondas, the 80 Honda, the XRs, all that crap. this right here is the way to go. Take it up in the gearing, because that's right there is where you're going to get your speed. But if you want torque, you want a bigger gear. So the bigger gear is going to give you climbing, and you're not going to get the bike into a wheelie, but it's going to help you get close. So if you want to go into a wheelie, you need a bigger sprocket. The biggest sprocket is going to get that front wheel up. The smallest sprocket is going to give you speed. If you have a 125 or a high horsepower bike, a high torque bike, then you want the bigger gear. So anyway, that's hopefully this video helps you with that. And as always, please subscribe if you have any questions or comments. I know this is confusing. It sounds confusing, but you know, basically just when you're watching the video and you're trying to figure it out, pause it, go back to it, reference it, you know, by all means. Hopefully it helps you. And it's just one of those things where it can be a nightmare trying to figure out what you want the bike to do, because you can't have top end. You can't have top end and torque at the same time to, you know, climbing. But for a medium gear, the 37 is kind of like in between both of them. So I like that. They actually make a smaller one too, but I don't want to go too small because then it really lugs the motor. You don't want to lug the motor. And basically you want the bike to perform the way you want it to perform, have speed and everything else, but you also want to be able to, you know, get out of your own way with it. If you go smaller than a 37, I think on a what do you call it, a KE100, you're not gonna move. You're gonna be like at full throttle trying to go anywhere, and then finally when it does let go, it's gonna go. So well, anyway, hopefully this video helps you, and if you have any questions, please comment what do you call it there, and please subscribe. Thank you.